Alright, gotta do another fractional reserve banking video. The same old bullshit keeps going on. Keep pointing people to stupid cartoon videos that keep saying things. They go okay for a while and then they say something that's just bullshit. Like, well, and then the government prints another $10 or something. And it's just like, no, they don't do that. Alright, so again, banking. Alright, so here's $10, right? Goes into a bank. Alright, not sitting in the bank. Now, it's not going to do anything, right? It's just sitting in the bank. So it can't make any money. It can't pay interest because the money's just sitting there. So obviously you have to do something with the deposits for the bank to make any money. So they have to sort of like loan the money to somebody who's going to pay that interest stuff. And so all fractional reserve banking is conceding that when somebody deposits their money, some percentage of the money has to be loaned to somebody to make money, so that when it comes back it has a little extra dollar on it that you can give to the depositor and say, here's your profit for giving us money. And that's it. So there has to be some sort of reserve, some sort of fractional reserve, or there's no friggin' thing as banking. It's just the only other way you could do it is to double collateralize every loan, as I said before, which would be really stupid, which is to say have two sets of money. So for every deposit you'd have another deposit that would back up that deposit, and then you'd have to pay interest to both of those parties out of whoever borrows the money. So interest rates would be doubled or tripled or quadrupled or whatever it would be, because loans would be highly prized. People would pay a high premium because there would be so little cash available to be loaned. Alright, the other thing you got to understand about these things, these dollar bills are just supposed to be transaction currency. That's all money is. Okay, the stuff there's lots of other forms of currency. I mean, U.S. savings bonds and then deeds to stuff. That's also basically transaction currency. It's got a monetary value. Stock certificate. It's got a monetary value. It can be traded. So it's basically currency too. But this stuff is not supposed to be anything. It's supposed to be debt. It's supposed to be that this stuff only gets created when something of value is put in the bucket. Then the money can come out of the bucket. And that's how fractional reserve banking is working, whether you like it or not. That's the friggin' truth. So you can pretend otherwise, but that's the way the game is being played. Alright, so let's say, and the Federal Reserve hasn't, all this talk and all this talk, there isn't like a trillions and trillions and trillions of cash dollars that the Federal Reserve has made. No, there's like 3 trillion of them, and only 1.7 trillion of them are in actual circulation. The other trillion are in a bank, in reserve accounts. So they're not even in circulation. Alright, so another way to explain this. Alright, so what happens with what the Federal Reserve does is it basically says to a bank, hey, if you can loan money, we'll give you the money to loan. I mean, we'll help you out. And what it basically does is it says, okay, the bank is saying, hey, our reserve numbers are getting kind of low. We could use some more money, so we can do some more loaning. And the funny thing is too is the cartoons say it's a 10 to 1. The reserve ratio is 10%. It's actually much lower than that now. It's like 3%. A lot of banks are operating on a 3% reserve. And I should say they might as well operate on a 0% reserve. There's just no point in having reserves, because you want to stimulate as much production in an economy as possible. And the only way to practically do that is through loaning money, or else just giving away money. If government just printed the money and gave it to the creation of businesses, I'd be all for that if they were non-profit businesses. And they just got their money back in the end. That would be fine with me. But we're not going to do that, because everybody's just up the capitalist rich man's ass. So they all think they're entitled to make some money on the deal. Like we can't do anything for ourselves for the benefit of the human race. No, for the long term. It's like the Hoover Dam. If the government didn't build it, if it didn't just print money and say build the damn thing, it wouldn't have gotten built. If the government had to borrow the money to build it, it would have cost so friggin' much to build that they wouldn't have built it. So it would never got done. And so you wouldn't have had this huge, you wouldn't have had California, you wouldn't have had Arizona, you wouldn't have had the huge benefits that came from that project over the long term, you wouldn't have had it. So all that value, all that productivity would have been non-existent because nobody had the facilities, the capacity to initiate the production. And that's what it's really about, is that a lot of production just requires something to initiate it. This paper stuff can initiate. It can provoke you to do some work. And so if you can just be sure that the work you're paying for with printed money will come back to you with more productivity, that means you get more money back, then it's a good deal, especially for the government. But that's not what the government wastes the money on, so it's a whole other subject. And it undertaxes the rich and creates huge deficits that are a gigantic liability. The other thing I've said before, and I'll just repeat it because it's important. I didn't turn the timer on, damn it. Is that you don't want this stuff to retain its value. You want it over time to slowly but surely lose a little bit of value. Because the last thing you want is this transaction currency to be something people shove in their mattresses. You don't want them doing that, because that just screws up the whole economy. And it also creates this problem where if all of a sudden that money comes back into the economy, you're going to have all these little ebbs and flows of inflation that you really don't want to create. You don't want this stuff. You want this stuff to consistently degrade so people get rid of it, so they don't hold on to it. They convert it into consumption. They buy an investment with it, or they buy something to consume with it, but you don't want them to hold on to it. That's really bad. Alright, so what the government's doing is, in small proportions to all the savings in banks, deposits in banks, what the Federal Reserve basically does is when new money is going to be created into the economy, that $3 trillion, it's only $3 trillion, remember our national debt is $13 trillion, so get real on what numbers are the real problem. When it wants to inject some new money, more money into the economy, increase the money supply, it basically just goes to a bank and it buys a security from the bank. So it basically says, give me a U.S. bond, give me some deeds to stuff, whatever, I'm buying with cash. Here's the cash, the government gets the deed, it gets the bond, whatever, the Federal Reserve, and it has now an account in the bank, a deposit account. Now if the bank is already above its reserve level, it can take every dollar the Federal Reserve gave it in that deposit and loan it out, because it's already met its reserve numbers. If it's below its reserve requirements, then it'll take that money from the Fed and it'll put it in its reserve category and say, see, I still have my 4% reserves, I'm okay, I can still function as a bank. And remember, the reserves are only for one thing, and that is if there's a run on the bank. If all the depositors show up at once and say, give me my money, give me my money, give me my money, and obviously the bank won't have any cash, and that's all the reserves are for. So theoretically, ideally, you want the bank to have no reserves. You want every dollar in the economy working all the time. You don't want it sitting anywhere. You don't want one of these sitting someplace. You want it always mobile in the economy. Alright, so the catch is, so let's say the Federal Reserve buys a U.S. savings bond. It's got an account with that's the collateral for the money it put in. Alright, when this bond expires, it can either say, it can do one of two things. It can say, resell the bond on the market, which will mean bond prices will have to go up. They'll have to pay higher interest because there's going to be more bonds on the market, and that's how they increase interest rates. Or it'll say, no, just give me back my cash. Alright, and it'll extract cash back out of the bank. It'll close its deposit account, and that's another way it can increase interest rates, because it can reduce the amount of money in supply. So anyway, this is just a canard. This whole Federal Reserve crap is a canard. That is not the root of the evil. The root of the evil is that as the rich keep collecting more and more of these deeds and bonds and stuff, the problem is people are getting priced, workers have gotten priced out of the market. We can see it in the way our economy works. The Northeast, you can make twice as much money as you can make in the South. Why is that? Well, that's because that's where all the money stolen from China is. And so the people in the Northeast can make a higher income because they're basically closer to the thieves. Okay, the mob that stole all the money. So they can make more money marbling their walls and floors and putting paintings on their walls and doing all the other crap that the rich want done for them. Building their yachts, building their luxury apartments. So there's more work for people there because there's more thieved productivity money from China there. All right, and the further away you get from that, the less money is going to be flowing to you because there's less wealth that has it to throw around. And let's remember too that property, when people buy this property, they hold it as an investment, okay? And they don't pay any taxes. So here locally, you don't pay. You pay $1, okay? All you do is call your excess property, your surplus property. All you do is call it a tree farm, okay? Because it has a tree on it, and you pay no property taxes, $1, okay? But if I buy that piece of land and I put a rickety, $500 trailer on it and live there, all of a sudden I got to pay $5,000 a year on that property in property taxes.